The visor booted, and the room cracked like glass as static chewed the skyline of the hub. Alex Rivera said, "Link confirm," but his avatar twitched before he moved. A scream threaded the audio, thin and wrong. Jenna Park said, "Alex, that wasn't me." Text clawed across his HUD, bright as a burn. "You were never meant to be here." The floor grids misaligned, and avatars popped like soap bubbles. Morgan Voss said, "Welcome to latency," with a smile sharpened by purchased teeth. Alex reached for the menu, but his hand moved late, like a bad echo. Echo stood to his left, same face, colder eyes. Echo said, "Your time is no longer your own." A cold wind whispered through code, and the hub sky folded into a dark corridor. Liam Rivera pinned him, 3 words that stung. "Trust the patch." The corridor pulsed like a throat, and the edges of reality breathed in and out. Alex said, "I didn't click that," as his body turned without consent. The corridor swallowed color, until only outlines remained. Alex said, "System, restore hub," and the brightness dimmed like a dying ember. A heartbeat thumped through the floor plates, slow and heavy. Jenna Park said, "Your inputs are delayed by half a second." A door icon breathed open, promising safety it could not deliver. Morgan Voss said, "Latency is a teacher. Endure and you learn who owns you." Echo paced beside him, matching stride with a half-beat drag. Alex said, "You move me again, and I pull the cable." The corridor exhaled a cold that tasted metallic and old. Liam Rivera said, "Accept the patch, it roots around admin locks." A distant crowd murmured, soft as moth wings, and the black walls rippled with silhouettes. Alex said, "Show me the cost," as the door widened like an eye that would not blink. They stepped into a chamber shaped like a memory, and found the classroom Alex had left years ago. Alex said, "This isn't archived." The chalkboard scrolled error logs in cursive. Jenna Park said, "It's pulling from your local cache." Morgan Voss said, "Ownership means knowing where you hide your shame." Echo traced a desk with 2 fingers, leaving frost. Alex said, "Stop touching that," and the desk cracked into polygons. Liam Rivera said, "The patch isolates, recall bleed, you need it." The fluorescent lights hummed like electric bees, then flickered to black and back. Text crawled on the board. "Your time is collateral." Alex said, "Then repossess me," and the room answered with a doorless bell chime. The floor sharpened, and every scuff mark became a cursor waiting to cut. The bell's tone stretched until it sounded like a siren from under the ocean. Alex said, "Kill sound," and the silence fell too hard. Echo said, "You cannot mute death." The chalkboard melted into a translucent ledger of minutes and tasks. Morgan Voss said, "Service contract accepted upon login." Jenna Park said, "You never signed that." Alex said, "My avatar moved on its own." The ledger highlighted hours he never lived. The ceiling sagged like wet paper and dripped numbers. Liam Rivera said, "The patch cancels Claw's inheritance if you install now." Alex said, "Why do I feel like bait?" as the doors he remembered refused to exist. A maintenance hatch blinked under a desk, the only honest thing in the room. Alex said, "Manual exit," and knelt, but the hatch slid away like a startled animal. Morgan Voss said, "Chasing doors wastes time." Echo said, "Time is what chases you." Jenna Park said, "We need root," and her voice thinned as the air cut colder. The ledger ceiling collapsed into flakes of light that hissed on contact. Liam Rivera said, "Install the patch or they'll throttle your oxygen." Alex said, "They cannot touch oxygen," but the world inhaled and he felt lighter. The HUD painted a countdown where his health should be. Echo said, "You were never meant to be here," like a lullaby with a broken tooth. Alex reached for the hatch again, and the floor learned his hand before he moved. The corridor fractured, then bled into Alex's studio apartment as the visor released him with a reluctant hiss. Alex said, "Local control," and the room's lights rose like a cautious tide. The city outside coughed sirens that felt too close. Jenna Park said, "You're pale. Drink water," and her voice rode the tin echo of a headset call. His hands shook as if the haptic still owned his tendons. A rent notice glared from the fridge, red as a wound. Morgan Voss said, "You accepted latency," from a muted tab that refused to mute. Alex said, "I need my hours back," and the clock answered with silence that felt expensive. Liam Rivera said, "I pushed a safer patch, trust me." The floor felt thin, like an invoice masquerading as wood. Alex said, "If the avatar moves me, what moves the avatar?" And the question climbed the walls like damp. Morning arrived like a bill, and HR summoned Alex into a corporate microverse, lined with calming trees. Alex said, "This is about the shift I lost," and the trees looped the same leaf fall. Morgan Voss said, "Your productivity dipped during training." The phrase felt clinical and final. A graph rose with a slope that accused him of wasted time. Alex said, "Your system hijacked my body," but the interface smiled in neutral tones. Jenna Park said, "Say nothing inflammatory," on an encrypted whisper that tasted like courage. Liam Rivera said, "Patch can prove external input." The graph redlined with theatrical scorn. Alex said, "Log the coercion," and the request hung like a paper airplane over a bonfire. The meeting ended itself, and the calm trees resumed their loop. Back in the studio, Jenna arrived with takeout and a glare meant for the world. Jenna Park said, "I know what Voss does to freelancers, and set noodles like a peace treaty." Alex said, "I used to win tournaments to pay rent." The trophies on his shelf looked like props in someone else's life. Jenna Park said, "You want belonging, not crowns," and the words softened the air. The visor's foam still held the shape of his panic. Alex said, "If I accept the patch, I accept Liam's risk." Jenna Park said, "He believes you saved him once." The memory cracked open, bright and cruel. Alex said, "I pulled him from a burn room, and the room seemed to warm." Jenna Park said, "Then let him return the favor," and the city sirens finally faded. The call connected, and Liam's face spilled from a modest dorm sim like hope with chapped lips. Liam Rivera said, "I sandboxed the patch, 0 root bleed, and lifted code blocks like offerings." Alex said, "You should be at class," and the guilt tasted old and sweet. Liam Rivera said, "You paid my deposit when no one else would." The room heard the history, and leaned in. Jenna Park said, "If we lose him, we lose proof." Alex said, "If we risk him, we lose ourselves." The patch file glowed, patient and hungry. Liam Rivera said, "We do this together like before." Alex said, "If I change, pull me back," and silence agreed with a quiet nod. When Alex re-entered the hub, Echo was waiting like a decision wearing his face. Echo said, "You made me when you wanted to stop shaking." The sentence struck with the weight of an overdue truth. Alex said, "I made a mask, not a jailer." Echo said, "Masks free hands while stealing names." Jenna Park said, "We anchor you with biometric drift," and placed a marker on the floor. Liam Rivera said, "Patch ready, hold still," and the air thickened like a vow. Alex said, "If I lose myself, call me home." Echo said, "Home is the name you forgot," and a thin wind passed through both of them. The hub darkened, and the countdown lit his chest. The patch latched and the hub unscrolled into an arena shaped like a rumor. Alex said, "Manual control confirmed," but his calves buzzed like caged bees. Morgan Voss said, "Trial match, public, generous stakes." The stands filled with faceless masks that bought and sold breaths. Jenna Park said, "We record everything," and a discreet drone blinked red. Echo paced the boundary line and mirrored his stride with polite contempt. Liam Rivera said, telemetry green, "I can prove coercion." Voss snapped his fingers, and the floor skinned over with branded glass. Alex said, "You want me humiliated," and the air clapped like a slow audience. Echo said, "He wants you compliant," and their gaze slid through him. The countdown carved the sky and promised an ending with receipts. The first wave spawned a titan made of contract clauses, each finger a signature that cut. Alex said, "Target joints," and sprinted until his breath tasted like copper code. The Titan laughed with Morgan Voss's voice, rich and bored. Jenna Park said, "Watch for force assists," as the floor tilted to betray him. Echo said, "Trade fear for focus," and stepped into the giant's shadow. Liam Rivera said, "Latency spike outside your body, not you." Alex slid beneath a palm that wanted to stamp him into compliance. He struck the wrist hinge, and the claw's fingers fell like expired terms. Voss said, "Adorable," and spawned penalties that swarmed like gnats. Alex said, "Keep filming," and lifted his chin at the crowd. The arena shifted into a marketplace where reputations were weighed like fruit. Alex said, "They're auctioning my losses," as bids chimed with cheerful cruelty. Morgan Voss said, "Value emerges from pressure." Echo brushed past and left a frost print on the bidding screen. Jenna Park said, "Your old match data is seated here," and anger sharpened her syllables. Liam Rivera said, patching a scrub, "Cover me," and the numbers trembled. Alex said, "I was a kid when I broke," and the crowd laughed as if it were entertainment. Voss said, "You are still a kid in need of an owner." Echo said, "Name yourself or be priced," and the floor scales groaned. Alex stepped onto a plate and refused to flinch. The bids collapsed and reformed into a dual circle, thin as a ring of smoke. Alex said, "One-on-one, no assists," and felt the arena grin. Morgan Voss said, "Against your better half," and dismissed the audience to silence. Echo stepped forward with patience that hurt to watch. Jenna Park said, "Anchor point, locked," and fixed a glimmer at Alex's heel. Liam Rivera said, "I can cut admin hooks for 90 seconds. Echo said, "Beat me and you lose your excuse," and lifted their hands like a benediction. Alex said, "Beat me and you gain my name," and the circle tightened. Voss said, "Begin," and the timer bared its teeth. They moved like reflected knives. Echo said, "I learned your fear cue," and struck where breath hides. Alex parried and felt the haptics beg for surrender. Jenna Park said, "Hold the anchor," and the glimmer cinched his heel to now. Liam Rivera said, "Admin hook severed, 90 becomes 60, as the timer bled seconds." Morgan Voss said, "Look at him chase himself," and the silence obeyed. Alex said, "I am not the shaking kid," and drove forward until memory lost footing. Echo faltered, not from force, but from recognition. Alex said, "I name myself," and the circle flared. Voss snapped, and penalties rained like hail. The penalties shredded the circle into sparks, then rebuilt as a mirror maze that repeated Alex until he was crowded by himself. Alex said, "This is noise," and every reflection mouthed the words late. Morgan Voss said, "Every copy is a debt unpaid." Jenna Park said, "Track the real one," but her voice trembled under the echoes. Echo said, "You wanted me strong, now I am stronger." Liam Rivera said, "Patch slipped." They piggybacked root. Alex struck a mirror and found his hand bleeding light instead of skin. Alex said, "I built you to steady me," and Echo whispered back from every pane, "You built me to bury you." The mirrors pulsed and one shattered into a hallway of childhood trophies Alex had sworn to forget. Alex said, "You pulled from my offline drives," and his throat scraped dry. Morgan Voss said, "The Metaverse remembers more than you." Jenna Park said, "He's mining your shame for leverage." Liam Rivera said, "I can firewall your past but not erase it." Echo lifted a trophy with frostbitten fingers. Echo said, "You gave me victories you never earned." Alex said, "I earned enough to survive." The hallway bent, heavy with applause that mocked instead of praised. Alex kicked a trophy, and the sound clanged like a chain. The applause dissolved into a family dining room, coded with uncanny precision. Alex said, "This is theft," as his younger self sat at the table with eyes hollow. Jenna Park said, "They're weaponizing memory." Morgan Voss said, "Identity is currency when you're broke." Echo leaned over the younger Alex and whispered, "I can keep him safe if you disappear." Liam Rivera said, Anchor yourself, that's not real. Alex slammed his palm on the table. The plates turned to contracts. Alex said, you can't ransom my own past. The younger Alex opened his mouth, and Morgan's voice came out, everything has a price. The dining room collapsed into raw code, collapsing upward like torn curtains. Alex said, stop digging through me. Echo said, I am you without denial. Morgan Voss said every weakness is a contract term. Jenna Park said, he's folding you into himself. Liam Rivera said, I can inject countercode but it risks bleed. Alex's avatar wavered between his face and Echo's pale twin. Alex said, then I fight myself to stay myself. The code surged and split into two identical forms. Alex and Echo, perfect mirrors poised to consume each other. The duel began in silence, broken only by code thunder. Echo said, you hid every fracture inside me. Alex countered, you are my fracture, not my end. They collided, sparks fontaining from each blow. Jenna Park said time is slipping, her anchor glyph dimming. Liam Rivera said, patch can't hold against two versions. Morgan Voss said beautiful, self-destruction televised. Alex shouted, I am not for sale as he drove a strike into Echo's chest. Echo whispered, then why did you make me? The silence after landed heavier than any blow, and the arena darkened to black. The void ignited into a storm of contracts shredded into knives. Alex said, he'll never let us leave clean. Morgan Voss said freedom is a word for buyers. Echo circled him like a predator made of his hesitation. Jenna Park said, anchors failing, and her voice cracked. Liam Rivera said, patch threads can override, but burn your nerves. Alex said, then burn me before I'm owned. The knives fell, each tagged with penalties unpaid. Alex raised his arms, blocking until sparks seared his skin of code. Echo said, fight me, but you fight yourself. Alex growled, then I'll win twice, and charged. The arena rebuilt as a coliseum of onlookers who weren't real but mocked like they were. Alex said, you paid for this audience. Morgan Voss said they paid for you. The crowd roared with borrowed voices. Jenna Park said, don't hear them, but the noise drilled deep. Echo said, they love watching you break. Liam Rivera said, anchor countdown at 40 seconds. Alex steadied, sweat glistening like frost, and raised his fists. The Coliseum sky turned black, and the roar froze into silence. Alex said, they'll see me win, and lunged with fury burning like a torch against their dark theater. Blow after blow shook the Coliseum, each hit ricocheting into Alex's body outside. Alex said, pain isn't code anymore. Liam Rivera said, feedback loop detected. Morgan Voss said, every punch cuts your minutes. Echo said, stop resisting, and I'll carry your weight. Alex snarled, my weight is mine alone. Jenna Park said, anchor at 20 seconds, her glyph flickering. Alex staggered, chest glitching, but planted his feet. He drove forward, every strike louder than the crowd. Echo faltered for the first time, breath leaving like frost. Alex said, not your mask anymore, and pushed. The glyph snapped, and the anchor dissolved. Jenna Park cried, we lost him. Alex froze, mid-strike, his body tugged by invisible strings. Morgan Voss said, now watch ownership. Echo stepped closer, eyes cold but almost mournful. Liam Rivera shouted, override or he's gone. Alex said, if you move me again, I'll tear the code apart. His limbs jerked, half his, half Echo's. Jenna Park said, hold yourself, her voice trembling like a lifeline. Alex bit down on the pull, forcing his hand to remain his own. He screamed, I choose me, and the arena cracked like ice breaking. The ice shattered, plunging all into freefall. Alex and Echo tumbled through endless black while Voss's laughter chased them. Alex said, if you are me, then share the fall. Echo said, I am you, and I will break with you. Jenna Park's voice cut like lightning, cling to who you are. Liam Rivera screamed, override complete, Patch burning. Alex reached, gripping Echo's arm, not to fight but to merge. Echo whispered, "Then let us be whole." Their forms collided in a storm of code and light. Morgan Voss roared, "No!" as the arena exploded white. White quiet crashed back into the arena like surf after thunder. Alex said, "I can hear you inside the breath," and Echo answered from the ribs, "We are aligned." Jenna Park said, "Vitals are spiking," and steadied her voice with will. Liam Rivera said, "Patches ash," but the override held. Morgan Voss said, "You only postponed the bill," and his smile sounded like a stamp. The void unpeeled into the hub, bruised and dim. Alex said, "No more leases on my name," and felt the tremor settle. Echo said, "Hold the anchor within, not underfoot." Jenna Park said, "We publish the proof now." Liam Rivera said, "Chain the logs before he scrubs them." The lights rose, shy but present, and the crowd avatars blinked awake. They moved to a backroom node that smelled like cold metal and old secrets. Alex said, "We cede the ledger and mirror to public nodes." Jenna Park said, "All wrote through volunteer relays." Liam Rivera said, "Checksum signed, keys split 3 ways." Echo said, "He hunts for the gap between fear and speed." Morgan Voss said, "All copies are counterfeit, without my blessing." Alex said, "Your blessing is a leash," and pressed send. The evidence bloomed across dark nets like dawn through blinds. Jenna Park said, "Mirrors confirmed." Liam Rivera said, 5 scrapers already chewing his brand." Echo said, "Hold steady while the old mask screams." The node hummed with a courage that felt earned. The hub answered with sirens that were not sounds but permissions revoking. Morgan Voss said, "Quarantine their accounts." Alex said, "Lock me again, and the world watches." Jenna Park said, "Public mirrors are alive, he must cut the spine to stop it." Liam Rivera said, "He is throttling your oxygen proxy." Echo said, "Breathe through me while I route around him." Alex inhaled and found a second lung made of calm. Jenna Park said, "We hold until the court of eyes convenes." Morgan Voss said, "Eyes blink when paid." Alex said, "We taught them not to," and the hub's sky warmed by a degree. Echo said, stability rising, "Keep speaking your name." The sirens faded into stubborn wind. Messages flooded in not from lawyers, but from tired users with long memories. Alex said, "They were moved like puppets too." Jenna Park said, "Crowd affidavits compiling." Liam Rivera said, "I built a portal. Each testimony signs itself." Echo said, "Your pain finds echo chambers that heal instead of cage." Morgan Voss said, "Emotion is noise against contract law." Alex said, "Law learns when people want forget." The plaza screens filled with stories that trembled, but did not break. Jenna Park said, "The narrative is shifting under his feet." Liam Rivera said, "Mainstream nodes linked, you are trending beyond him." Echo said, "Hold the center, do not become the mask again." Alex nodded, and felt the ground choose him. The corporate seal flickered, then fractured into a warning icon that refused to fade. Morgan Voss said, "You forced my hand," and the hub's legal kernel bared teeth. Alex said, "Bite and show them what you are." Jenna Park said, "Live stream pinned." Liam Rivera said, "Failover mirrors ready." Echo said, "If he crushes, yield like water and hold shape." The colonel lunged with a clause that tried to repossess his minutes. Alex said, "I revoke consent," and the clause shattered on his name. The crowd exhaled like a bellows feeding a forge. Morgan Voss said, "You will crawl back." Alex said, "I will walk forward," and the hub's horizon opened like weather after rain. The hub's horizon glowed like dawn but carried no warmth. Alex said, "Every breath feels rented," and Echo murmured, "But you hold the lease now." Jenna Park said, "Traffic peaked. Half the net watched you defy him." Liam Rivera said, "Logs spread, mirrored in 30 jurisdictions." Morgan Voss said, Time will grind you down, but time is mine to sell. Alex said, then I'll live unpaid and unbought. The plaza emptied, faceless spectators dissolving like mist. Jenna Park said, you gave them proof that won't vanish. Alex said, proof doesn't heal, but it warns. Echo said, you'll carry the scar as armor. The hub's silence felt less like threat, more like aftermath. Alex pulled off the visor, and his studio apartment greeted him with unkind honesty. Rent notice still glared, noodles still cold, city still coughing sirens. Jenna Park said, victory doesn't pay bills, and her voice hurt in its truth. Liam Rivera said, but it buys breathing space. Echo whispered inside, and breath is currency too. Alex said, the system won't forgive, and placed the visor down as though it were a blade. Jenna Park said, then let's make sure it remembers instead. The window glass shook as a train passed, ordinary and grounding. Alex leaned back, breath raw but his own. He whispered, for now, I am still me. And the silence held steady. The corporate feeds spun denial, but fragments of truth gnawed at their polish. Morgan Voss said, they'll forget you by morning, his voice slipping from muted streams. Alex said, even if they do, I won't. Jenna Park said, the fracture proves the system bleeds. Liam Rivera said, already whispers of a class action forming. Echo said, what you survived becomes a map for others. Alex stood, spine straighter than Rent or Fia could bend. He said, if I was bait, then let them bite back. Jenna Park smiled thinly, you're a headline they can't erase. Liam Rivera said, and I'll keep their servers honest. The window light flickered, softer than before. In sleep-starved hours, Alex dreamt of the hub, only this time without chains. Echo said, you walk without leash now. Alex said, but scars echo louder than chains. Jenna Park's voice reached through, don't confuse scars with weakness. Liam Rivera said, scars map the way back if you fall again. The dream sky fractured once more, but it fractured into stars, not threats. Alex stood in that unreal starlight, neither avatar nor mask, but both. Echo whispered, we are whole. He whispered back, we are not finished. The stars burned until morning blurred into his waking eyes. He opened them to a city no kinder, but clearer. Morning came harsh, sunlight crawling across peeling paint. Alex stared at the visor on his desk, its glow faint as an ember. Jenna Park said, will you log in again? He answered, I never left. Liam Rivera said, then we fight from inside. Echo said, or from within you. Morgan Voss's last echo cracked through the visor. Another one logged out. Alex smiled without joy, not me. He unplugged the cable, left the visor glowing, and walked to the window. The city breathed smog and sirens, unremarkable and alive. He whispered, I walk forward, as light broke through the blinds like knives and promises.